Hey everybody, I'm Patrick Kolbeck, and welcome to another edition of Meet the Rocket Scientist podcast with Let's Fix Stuff. My guest today is a repeat guest. It's Nick Ruiz of Evolution Consulting. And Nick is an expert on a lot of different topics, particularly around the techie world, but he also deals a little bit in the legal world related to the techie world. And this is the first in what we plan to be a series of podcasts talking about the legal agreements that we actually sign when we agree to use the services of various social media platforms. And so fittingly, we've titled this podcast series, I Signed What? And so I just want to introduce everybody to Nick Ruiz of Evolution Consulting. Nick, welcome to the podcast again. And what are you hoping that folks get out of this podcast series?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me back on again. And a very appropriate title is I Signed What? Because I'm fairly convinced at this point the number of people that actually read the legal agreements, myself included, on a lot of stuff that I sign up for, you can count them on one hand. And in some instances, not every single instance, but in a lot of instances, that's what these companies are counting on. And that kind of goes straight to the fact that data. The whole point, and privacy, when you talk digital privacy, people are concerned about their personal data, their internet footprint. And these companies have learned over time, over the last 2-3 decades of marketing, digitally, and certainly long before that, how to monetize, use, and leverage that data.
So these platforms aren't actually free? Is that what you're saying? Because you're using the word monetize, but I don't pay any money when I sign up for these services. How are they making money?
Well, I have a basic rule, and it's certainly not just mine. It's been kind of, standard operating procedure, standard thought processes for the tech world for quite some time, and that is when you, especially, and this applies to way beyond the tech world, but especially in the wonderful world of tech, if something is free, let's just get our heads around this. If something is free, that whatever it is that you're using, a PDF converter, a free image converter, all the way up to the Facebooks, the Googles, the Amazons, the Apples, and all these so-called free services cost money to these companies. They have to be hosted in data centers. They have to be hosted on servers. They have to be maintained by guys like yours truly, and we don't work cheap. And they have to be developed further, right? So these free products that they're just giving away out of the goodness of their heart cost them money. Well, that doesn't sound like it's really a winning proposition. So the rule is, if you can't figure out what the product is, these companies have to be getting something out of this to offer a free product of any variety. So what are they getting out of it? What they're getting out of it is your data, your interest.
So you're the product.
You are the product. Yes, that's the saying, is if you can't figure out what the product is, you're the product. And that's 10 out of 10 times that is true. And if somebody has an example, now the one thing I will exclude from this is that there are some open source programs that are what's called freeware. Linux is especially the Linux environment, all the various flavors and distros of Linux. When a service or product is offered for free, they're but not all, again, most of the time, that is a truly free product. That's developed peer-to-peer by developers. But when you see a commercially marketed internet cloud-based or in most instances in Windows desktop-based or certainly mobile, forget it. 9.5 out of 10 times, a free mobile app is free for a reason. That's either to show you ads or collect various data points about you.
Wow. Well, so what kind of data points are they collecting? I mean, on a lot of these social media platforms, what could be useful, and who are their customers? Who are they selling this information to?
Well, it depends. I mean, anybody, and it's not just limited to, so I'm just going to use the systems that we built here at Evolution as an example of what I would consider one flavor, not the only one, but one flavor of data collection. I can take the systems that we built here and I can scrape every social media platform from the front side. So if you posted it publicly for the world to see, Evolution Systems can scrape and compile that data. And what we use that for is linguistic algorithmic trend forecasting, right? Now, does that mean that
say that 5 times fast? Yeah.
Right? Sounds impressive, doesn't it? Doesn't fit on a business card, though, and I don't think anybody would be interested anyway. But you do what? No, what we're doing is we're taking broad range metrics. So we're not looking at one person and saying, John Smith from Walla Walla, Washington is interested in this, that. That's not what we do here. We're looking to add all that language, all those linguistic components into a broad range macro outlook, right? Now, that is what I would consider ethical use of data. And that is, you posted it on the internet, you went send, post, or whatever, and now we can see and we factor that in. So we're not seeing anything that you don't want us to, right? Now, let's get into the slightly more sinister version of that, which is apps, for instance. What would an app be interested in? Well,
you're talking about an app for a smartphone, for example.
Smartphone, tablet, even TVs. For those of you that have smart TVs, what they're going to do is they're going to look at your.
Yeah. By the way, I've learned that anytime you have the prefix "smart" on it, the idea is they're taking you for a dummy. I just.
The idea is for the device to be smarter than the owner.
Yeah.
And so, if I'm building an app, well, let's say I want to check the browser history. That's why a lot of times when you see apps after you download them, be that on your iPhone or your Android device, they ask for permissions. We'll get into that in a second. But what they're looking for is they want to be able to access your browser history. Why? Are they pulling a CCP? Are they doing a Chinese, a social media or a credit score based on that, everything? No, they're looking to market to you. So if you have kids in your house, for instance, and they're looking at gaming stuff, or they're looking at whatever they're, and all of a sudden you start seeing ads on your Facebook account, what they're doing is they're looking at your browser history, going, well, what is this person likely to buy? What are their interests? What sub-demographics of our marketing data can we sell the space that they're going to see? Who can we sell that to? Who's most likely to make a sale so we get a referral fee?
Yeah, and I can tell you, as somebody who's run for political office and served in political office, that same information is used in context of political campaigns as well. And so and that's what we talked about in regards to my governor campaign. That's how we got to know each other, is you helped me understand what are the key concerns of people that are out there in the real world expressing their concerns for all the world to go off and see. How do we capture all that information, synthesize it so that I can focus? And I paid good money for that too. So it was it is something that is very valuable to a lot of different people. And obviously you can see what the value is in a political campaign, but all it really is a marketing campaign. I mean, except the product is a candidate for office instead of a chocolate bar. So but the Hershey's and all those other chocolate bar manufacturers capture this information as well, and they need to go off and understand what are consumers looking for.
Well, I think you saw with your campaign. So we didn't look at any one specific person that may or may have not have voted for you or someone else, whatever. But we took those and we put together what's called composites, and we were able to take a large section of data based upon forward-facing linguistics and be able to pigeonhole them into one of 8 composites. And I know on a number of instances you saw where our linguistics that we made a composite idea from, you heard those exact words as you were cruising around the campaign trail. So it can be done correctly. It can be tremendously accurate, all right? And again, I consider that an ethical use of data because we didn't look at any data that was in anybody's private email boxes. We didn't look at any data that was in a private direct or text message or phone conversation. We just took front-facing, readily available, anybody can see it data. What makes some of these systems a little bit more sinister, though, is that, depending upon, getting into the legalese of it, away from the tech for a second, depending upon the boxes you check, you don't know exactly what data they have access to, right? So all they're really looking to do in most instances is make a more effective matrix to be able to sell ad space, which you can make an argument for and against. And look, I mean, not playing devil's advocate here, but you could say, look, they're a private company. You signed up for their free service. You checked the box. Sorry, dude, that's your problem.
Yeah.
Right? There's a heck of an argument to be made there. Where it starts to get spooky, though, and I think that this is really kind of where we're coming up on, is where you start to see that data used for shaping narratives.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
And censoring one whole side of those narratives through censorship, and that gets a little dangerous. So what are the big risks? I mean, we're kind of straying into that big question here. What are the risks for me as a user for some of these free apps that are out there, like social media platforms?
At present, most of it's influencing. The Shadowgate documentary talking about IIA,
Hmm.
internet influencing operation. Well, it's a lot easier to do that to demographics you've clearly
Well, wait,
identified.
wait, just to pause on that Shadowgate documentary we're talking about. This is something that was done by Millennial Millie Weaver, and if you go, I think her website is millennialmillie.com, and you can see this, and it talks about some of the tools that are out there for what are called influence operations, and you'll get a little bit better picture of how government agencies and people working on behalf of government agencies can actually use some of this information to shape the battlefield, so to speak, in political campaigns or political policy campaigns that are out there. So I just want to highlight it's a really useful documentary if you get a chance to dive into it. So sorry, I wanted to.
Oh no, that is a very good document. And as far as the IIA, the way they dissected that, they are, in terms of intent, 100% correct there. But where this data starts to become that you're feeding into the Facebook, Twitter, Amazon, Google, take your pick. Um, they have every right to collect it and use it whichever way they so choose. We'll get past that first. I know in my saying that I'm going to be a pretty unpopular guy here. But it's theirs. They offered you the free service. No one twisted your arm to sign up for it. You did it out of convenience or curiosity or because you needed that hit of dopamine of approval every time somebody hits like or share on one of your tweets or Facebook posts or whatever.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, you checked the box that says, I hereby agree. And you most certainly did. So they're well within their rights to do that. But in terms of the more dangerous uses of this, so with front-facing data, you can see how effective that just little old me here was with your campaign, right? So data is a force multiplier. You could have sent out 1,000 canvassers to collect data, and it wouldn't have pulled in. This is not me tooting my own horn here. This is just statistics.
Yep.
You wouldn't have gotten as clear a picture of the battlefield, so to speak, as you did with just one lunatic behind a keyboard and a couple
Yeah.
hours of free time. Um,
Computational systems are force multipliers. I mean, that's what they really are.
and so is the output, the data,
Yeah.
and that gave you as candidate Pat tremendous insight. So let's port that over to, let's say Nick's got an upstart brand, right, and I want to market that effectively to certain demographics. Well, I need to know where to buy ad space. I need to know how much I should be paying for that ad space. I need to know what time those users are going to be on, where they're most likely going to be looking. Now, where am I going to get that data from? There's a million sources of it. Some of them are mainstream and it's for sale. Facebook will sell that data. Amazon will sell that data.
Now, who
Twitter.
are their primary customers? I mean, we're talking about big corporations. We talking about little mom and pop shops, or what's going on there?
So I have a good friend of mine who specializes in internet marketing, and he has created through the acquisition, I mean, very intelligent usage of data, the acquisition, the usage, and the redissemination, which means feeding it back in even more refined. He's created a little multi-million-dollar meat grinder, is what I call it. He can take any product, doesn't matter what it is. He specializes in certain ones. I'm not going to say what it is, but he specializes in certain products, and people will bring these products to him and go, I have an idea. Oh, okay. I want to market this to demographic XYZ, and I think maybe ABC might be interested also. Okay. So he goes into his database of, I couldn't tell you how many tens of millions of names. He does some database calls and goes, okay, these guys fall into that demographic. They fall into that demographic. These guys, he's bought some of that data from Facebook. He's bought some of that from Instagram, and he can take this product and go, yeah, we want to put it in front of these demographics. They're usually on at about 7 to 9 p.m. Mondays and Wednesdays and he can drill it down so that when that person spends those ad dollars to advertise their product, right, they know they're getting the best possible chance.
Yeah.
Now, do I consider that the unethical usage of data? No, because it's been going on since, mail order catalogs.
Yeah.
Mail order catalogs like Montgomery Ward, not that anybody watching has even ever heard of that, but if you go all the way back, the original Sears Roebuck catalog and stuff like that,
Yeah.
they would sell those mailing lists. So if they saw you bought a lot of outdoorsy equipment, you might get a magazine subscription or a free catalog about deer hunting, let's say. How did they know that? that was the OG equivalent of data sharing
Now,
and data collection.
So let's take this into the unethical use of this information, which I suggest gets into more of the control mindset, in particular how some of this data has been used to control behavior in countries like China. You know, they've got something called a social credit system which is starting to have vestiges here in the United States with corporate America, where they're starting to give corporations scores that they can use to filter access to certain platforms for those corporations, or communicate certain information that they may not find very flattering. So maybe how can this data be misused?
I'm laughing because as you're telling me this, out of the corner of my eye, a good friend of mine who also happens to be a game streamer, literally 5 seconds ago just sent me something that Twitch, the game streaming company, which is owned by Amazon, is going to be assigning streamers brand friendliness scores. Perfect example of it. And this particular individual that I'm speaking about is not what one would call brand friendly.
Yeah.
In fact, he's about as subtle as overhand tossing a brick into a running lawnmower, so that ought to be interesting. But that aside, yeah, I mean, the nefarious use of this data in terms of a control mechanism, I will be the first to say this, is going to backfire horribly. It's not going to work, okay? And we'll get into that later as to why. And some of my research.
Maybe it's a cultural thing, but it seems to be effective out in China right now.
It is somewhat, but they also have a very different way in the system, and they've been doing it for a lot longer than us.
Okay.
Right? You know, trying to cork the well that's already overflowed is what you're doing in the States. The political division and the toxicity of society is such that you could try to censor it away, and all it's going to do is take a new form, and it's going to create whole other problems. So that atrophy is underway. I call it the American condition, but we're not going to get off on that rant now. But as far as the nefarious use of this data, targeting individuals, okay, targeting smaller subsets for censorship, yeah, okay, that data can be used for that, okay, to profile certain demographics for cancel culture, if you will. Yeah, it can be used for that. The data, it's almost, and I've had this conversation with somebody recently, it's almost like the gun control debate. You leave a rifle sitting on a counter, or you leave a rifle, you know, sitting in its case or a gun safe, it's not going to hurt anybody. You need the human element there.
Yeah.
Data is the same way. Data are statistics. Can they be weaponized? Yes. Should they be weaponized? That's a debate for another time.
Yeah.
Will they be weaponized?
Yeah. They already have been.
And it already has been, right?
Yeah.
So really, it comes down to the applicable usage. You know, and I know there's folks that flip out about internet privacy. It's like, well, first of all, that's an illusion.
Yeah.
Digital privacy is an illusion. So if anybody thinks they're running, you know, any kind of super duper private, unless you have a very specifically configured VPN, and I mean professionally configured VPN, and even then, internet privacy is an illusion, because there's too much money to be made in the harvesting of the data, the usage of the data, the marketing. There's way too much to be done there. You're not going to stop, and I don't think it should be stopped.
So, so in summary here, with everything we've been talking about, the whole idea of these quote-unquote free platforms, that we sign these legal agreements without actually reading them beforehand, they open you up to this nice little world of money, power, and control. And, you know, in future episodes, we're going to go into specific platforms like Facebook, like Instagram, like Twitter, and we're going to go through the actual policies that people sign, and we're going to go through line by line and show you some of the more egregious features of these legal agreements that you may or may not be aware of. So I want to thank you, Nick, for joining us today. It's a little primer into what we can expect in these future episodes, and I just want to thank you for sharing your expertise with everybody.
No worries, Pat. I'm actually looking forward to it too, and for those that are watching, you want to stay tuned for these, because some of these legal clauses that are in these agreements, data usage agreements, are actually so bad they're funny. It's worth tuning in.
Well, tune in next time as we delve further into this whole topic of I signed what.